Now, I'm going to tell you something that isn't written in history books about how Vikings managed their minds during 60 days of zero sunlight. Not 60 days of grey skies, not 60 days of short afternoons, 60 days where the sun never clears the horizon, where noon looks like midnight, where children are born, grow sick, recover, and celebrate, all without ever seeing daylight. This is the reality of the Norse Arctic winter, and for over 500 years, these people not only endured it, they built a civilization inside it. We look back at the Norse people and see the clichés: axes, raiders, berserkers foaming at the mouth, primitive, brutish. We assume that without our pharmaceuticals, our blue light therapy lamps, our seasonal affective disorder diagnoses, they must have suffered enormously, gone mad, collapsed inward. They did not. And the reason why should disturb you. Act 1. The great, dark understand first what we are actually describing. In Scandinavia above the Arctic Circle, the phenomenon called polar night, mørketid, the Norwegians, call it the murky time, is not a metaphor. It is a biological assault. The human circadian rhythm is a solar clock. It is calibrated to light. Strip that light away for 2 consecutive months, and the body begins to malfunction. Cortisol patterns collapse, melatonin surges at the wrong hours, serotonin production drops, motivation dissolves, cognitive sharpness dulls. This is not weakness, this is biology. For a culture without electric light, without heating systems, without grocery stores, without the option to simply fly south, this was a filter. The Great Dark separated those with a system from those without one. And the Norse, over generations, built a system so sophisticated, so layered, so psychologically precise, that it is only now, with modern neuroscience, that we can finally read what they were doing. They did not fight winter, they became part of it. Act 2. The protocol: most modern people reach for a pill when the sun disappears. The Vikings reached for something else entirely, something much more powerful. They reached for a system, 7 interlocking defenses, built not in laboratories, but hammered out across centuries of survival and failure. It was a quiet daily war, and the main weapon was not steel, but ingenuity. Layer 1. The biological defense. Start with the body, because the mind cannot outlast what the body cannot sustain. The Norse diet during winter was, by modern nutritional standards, extraordinary. Fatty fish, herring, cod, mackerel dominated the cold season menu. Animal blubber, rendered and consumed directly, provided extraordinary caloric density. Fermented lichen, consumed in small quantities as a digestive supplement alongside preserved. Meats introduced complex microbiome support that we are only beginning to catalogue scientifically. Here is what this diet actually was, translated into language we understand today. They were chugging nature's antidepressant. Fatty fish at Norse consumption levels delivers vitamin D concentrations capable of compensating, partially, not entirely, but meaningfully, for total solar deprivation. Omega-3 fatty acids at those quantities demonstrably influence serotonin synthesis and receptor sensitivity. Modern psychiatry now prescribes both as adjunct treatments for seasonal affective disorder. The Norse did not know the word serotonin. They knew that if you ate the right things through winter, you stayed sharp. Nothing wasted. Every calorie was also medicine. Layer 2. The physical defense. The longhouse was not a building, it was a survival machine. To truly understand the Norse mind, we are using advanced visualization tools to reconstruct these lost moments, creating conceptual simulations of a world that existed before the first electric bulb was ever imagined. And what those reconstructions reveal is breathtaking in its engineering logic. The longhouse was built partially into the earth, insulated from below by the ground's geothermal stability, insulated from above by turf roofing that trapped warmth, with an efficiency rivaling modern passive house construction. The walls curved inward at the roofline, a shape that circulated rising warm air rather than losing it to corners. The central hearth sat at the structure's heart, and at full burn, it produced light in the range of 2,500 Kelvin. 2,500 Kelvin. That is the exact spectral temperature that modern light therapy researchers have identified as optimal for circadian rhythm stimulation. It is warm, amber, flickering. It produces the same biological signal as late afternoon sunlight. This is not coincidence. This is selection. Over generations, the hearth that produced the right light was the hearth that produced the right minds, and the right minds survived. The effect inside that longhouse, shadows leaping across curved timber, walls, firelight carving faces out of darkness, was what painters would later call chiaroscuro, high contrast, deep shadows, brilliant focal warmth. The Norse did not call it anything. They just knew, gather here. This is where you do not lose your mind. Layer 3, the social defense. But here's the trade-off nobody mentions in textbooks. The longhouse was not comfortable. Not by any modern standard. It was loud. It smelled of animals. Privacy was non-existent. You slept within arm's reach of your neighbors, your cousins, your rivals, your livestock. And this was the point. The longhouse functioned as a live-in support group. Polyphasic sleep patterns. Multiple, shorter sleep cycles across a long winter night, rather than one consolidated block, kept at least some members of the household awake and functional at all times. Communal body heat from both humans and their animals raised ambient temperature meaningfully. But beyond the physics, the social architecture of the longhouse enforced what modern psychology calls behavioral activation through social obligation. You could not disappear into depression in a longhouse. There was nowhere to disappear to. Isolation, the primary accelerant of seasonal depression, was structurally impossible. If you went quiet, someone noticed. If you stopped eating, someone asked why. The social fabric was not a comfort. It was a surveillance system. A warm, familial, occasionally suffocating surveillance system that kept the darkness from eating you alive. They thrived. Layer 4. The behavioral defense. Now think about today. When modern humans face long, dark, purposeless days, we scroll. We watch. We consume passively. We mistake entertainment for activity and then wonder why the emptiness deepens. The Norse winter was filled with work, not survival labor. That was largely handled by autumn's harvest and storage, but craft labor. Men carved, women wove. Tools were repaired, sharpened, redesigned. Ships were inspected, caulked, modified. Harness leather was oiled. New designs were tested. This is what modern behavioral psychology calls behavioral activation. The deliberate scheduling of purposeful, productive activity to interrupt the feedback loop of low mood and low motivation. It is a cornerstone of current depression treatment protocols. The Norse did not schedule it. They had no alternative. When darkness falls and the food is stored and the fields are frozen, you either make something with your hands or you sit with nothing but your own thoughts. And the Norse had seen enough of what sitting with nothing produced, nothing wasted. Every hour had a product. Layer 5. The narrative defense. That's only half the story. The hands were occupied, but the mind needed something larger, something beyond the walls. Something that could travel. The sagas served this function. Oral tradition, later transcribed, carried the Norse through winter like mental escape films running on continuous loop. These were not casual stories. They were immersive, extended narrative experiences told by skilled practitioners who understood pacing, tension, release, and the specific hunger of a mind trapped in darkness and craving distance. A saga told. Well over 3 winter nights was not entertainment. It was transportation. The listener's nervous system did not distinguish in its deeper registers between experiencing an adventure and hearing one told with sufficient skill and detail. The same imaginative circuitry activated. The same emotional release followed. The darkness outside the longhouse walls became irrelevant. Inside, men were sailing, fighting, loving, dying gloriously. The body was in the cold. The mind was elsewhere. Layer 6, the ritual defense. But even transportation has limits. Even the Yard best story ends. And the Norse understood something about human psychology that we have largely forgotten. The mind needs not just escape, but reset. Yule was that reset. Celebrated at the winter solstice, the precise astronomical moment when darkness stops deepening, and the trajectory reverses. Yule was engineered as a dopamine event. Specific foods available only at this time, fires larger than normal, social obligations suspended in favor of celebration. The ritualistic acknowledgement, repeated across every longhouse in the Norse world simultaneously, that the worst was over. The solstice itself changed nothing physical. The days after the solstice are still dark. The cold intensifies through January. Nothing materially improved, and yet the psychological architecture of Yule manufactured a genuine turning point because the human brain responds not only to conditions, but to narrative. Tell the brain the story is changing, and it begins to change. The Norse told themselves that story every year at the same moment, with the same rituals. And it worked. Layer 7, the philosophical defense. But stay with me, because at the end, I will reveal the darkest psychological method of all, the one that allowed them to turn the crushing weight of the Arctic night into a weapon. Here it is. Wired. The Norse concept of fate was not passive resignation, it was active acceptance. The belief that one's fate was woven, immovable, fixed, glorious in its very inevitability, functioned as a psychological armor against the particular terror that destroys modern minds during dark seasons, the terror of meaninglessness. Modern seasonal depression is not only biological, it is also existential. The darkness arrives, and with it the question, what is this for? The suffering feels purposeless, the endurance earns nothing, the mind asks why and finds no answer, and the asking itself becomes destructive. The Norse had an answer. The darkness was the forge. Endurance was not passive. It was the act that shaped you into something harder than you were before. A warrior who had not survived the Great Dark was not yet fully formed. The suffering was not incidental to the life. It was the curriculum. This did not eliminate pain. It transformed pain into meaning. And meaning, as every psychologist working with trauma today will confirm, is the variable that separates those who are destroyed by suffering from those who are defined by it. Act 3. The modern mirror. What we now call seasonal affective disorder, we treat with light therapy, vitamin D supplementation, antidepressants, behavioral activation therapy, social engagement protocols, and cognitive reframing techniques designed to restore a sense of meaning and purpose. Every single one of those interventions has a direct, functional Norse equivalent. The hearth fire, the fatty fish, the winter craft, the longhouse community, the sagas, the word. We discovered these treatments through clinical trials and neuroimaging studies. The Norse discovered them through 1,000 years of trial, error, survival, and refinement. We built laboratories. They built longhouses. The darkness was not their enemy. It was their sharpener. The system they built inside it was not desperate improvisation. It was sophisticated design, tested across generations, refined by consequence. Does your life currently have a system for the dark seasons? Or are you just waiting for the sun to return? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because the sun will return. It always does. The question is what you will have made of yourself before it gets here.